Gisore, who is the ARSO Technical Director, to tell us about the project under ARSO on the Africa traditional medicine, linking it to the bigger program of pharmaceutical industrialization in Africa. Ruben Gisore. You have 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General, and I'm happy to give a very brief presentation here on the African traditional medicine, particularly the work that we are doing at the African Organization for Standardization with respect to harmonization of standards for African traditional medicine. And in this respect, I also would like to recognize the fact that Professor Iwo is part of our very able teams that are working on this process. The African harmonization of the standards for African traditional medicine aims to harmonize terminologies and to facilitate exchange of information among stakeholders. And particularly, we are looking at ensuring that we have the right documentation that promotes the mainstreaming of African traditional medicine into the healthcare system of African countries. And this comes in recognition of the fact that a lot of people in the continent derive their healthcare from African traditional medicine. And one of the untold stories, of course, remains that some of the resistance we see to diseases in the continent originate from the use of African traditional medicine to a big extent. And some of these medicines, we consume them as food, and sometimes we take them in a manner that is very easy. You are trained from the beginning of life that this is what you take when you feel either tired, or when you feel like you have a cough, or you feel like you are tired. So a lot of these things have now grown into us, that to the point where sometimes we take the medicine without knowing what you're doing. But now we are looking at how do we document this? And this is the purpose of the standardization that we are doing. When we look at the global scene, you realize that the Chinese have actually reached that international level. At the ARSO level, they have taken the standardization process of traditional Chinese medicine to the international community. And when you look at the support structure behind them, you find that they have a well-structured technical committee system at home that gives them guidelines for manufacturing safe and regular herb preparations in individual clinics, quality and safety of raw materials, and traditional processing, quality and safety of quality and safety of manufactured traditional medicine products. And you look at even the medical devices they use, and then this terminology and informatics. Now, this is a system that tells you they are looking at mainstreaming the traditional medicine into their healthcare system. Now, if you look at China and Africa, you find that we are better endowed with the traditional medicine, our medicinal plants, and these systems have been with us for longer than the Chinese. But the difference is that we have not documented this system, and therefore we really need to move forward into ensuring that we have a proper documentation in this system. When we look at what we are doing in the deficit, when we have this deficit of documentation, we have currently a project with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, where we have started developing illustrated outreach materials with original pictorials to facilitate clear identification of the medicinal plants and the preparation of the remedies. Now, this is a sample of what we are doing, and looking at the documentation, we're able to identify what are the therapeutic uses, the parts of the plant that is used, the country that this is common, and the preparation, what type of preparation it is, and if there is research that has been done, who has documented that. So that helps us to have a repository of documentation that supports the use of traditional medicine in the various contexts. And then we can bring this together and demonstrate that with this usage, it is possible to address some of the elements that we encounter in life. Now, we have a 3-year project. And in this 3-year project, we are happy to thank the AfCFTA Bank, that is called the African Export-Import Bank, and the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, ITFC, through the Arab Africa Trade Bridges program. Now, they came together and asked ARSO, what is the intervention that you can carry out in this pandemic and the post-pandemic period to ensure that the continent has a quality and safety of medicines and medical devices, either those that are imported or those that are produced in the continent. But the emphasis is those that we produce in the continent. And in this respect, I also responded by putting together the team that you see, 4 technical committees, 3 of them in terms of standardization, and 1 on technical regulations and conformity assessment. Now, we are going to look at the short highlight of what each of these committees does. The first description here, we look at the component. We have the harmonization of standards as for component number 1, then harmonization of conformity assessment and regulations for compliance. And there are 2 phases. One is a short-term phase of standards that address the pandemic within 6 months, and a long-term phase where we are looking at a longer-term investment scenario, where we are building the infrastructure that supports the continent on a long-term basis and a sustainable system that will be ongoing for a longer time. Now, the committees that we have put in place, one deals with medical devices, ARSO TC 78, and this will look at a wide range of products, from assistive products, electrical equipment in medical practice, transfusion, infusion and injection equipment, up to mechanical contraceptives and the quality management of medical devices. Now, we normally would want to make sure that these are linked to international systems, and you can see that we have listed the international or ISO TCs that this committee corresponds to. Now, in our first meeting of this committee, it was important to start having working groups, and the working groups that we already have include Group 1, which deals with the masks, gowns, and surgical suits, Group 2, which deals with shields and gloves, Group 3, which deals with filters, lung ventilators, and oxygen concentrators. Now, the countries currently participating are 16 as listed, and I need not mention, I think you can look at the presentation later on. But we are happy that a wide range of countries are present from north to south, east to west of the continent. We have ARSO TC 80, which deals with pharmaceuticals and medicinal products. Now, when we mention the 2, you need to understand the concept that the pharmaceuticals, we are looking at the actual medicines that are used, and then the medicinal products, those that are used within the medical environment, hospital environment. And this would be, for example, the sanitizers, there would be the disinfectants, and also aspects of laboratory medicine, pharmaceuticals themselves. And then we are looking at the equivalence of this. And the equivalence is with a big number of international committees so that we maintain that international aspect of the committee. The countries participating in this are also 16, and we are happy that the first meeting happened yesterday, and we are moving forward to implementing the process of having the standards in this sector. Now, the one that we are discussing today, and which is the centerpiece of our intervention, is the African traditional medicine, is given as ARSO TC82. And the scope of this committee is encapsulated in the working groups that have been established. And these groups are: number one, terminology and documentation. This is very critical to ensure that we have the right documentation about the African traditional medicine, the remedies, how they are prepared, from which plants, and how they are administered. Then we have working group 2, which deals with the cultivation, collection, and quality and safety of the raw materials. Very important, so that we do not get contaminated materials entering into the medical system. Then group 3 deals with the quality, safety, and efficacy of the manufactured ATM products. Now, this is the value addition part, where you'll have either capsules, caplets, or syrups derived from the medicinal plants. Then number 4 deals with the medical devices and equipment. And you may need to ask, what are these? When you talk of the fumigation devices, for example, the one that is used in the African system to develop the fumes that we inhale, and they cause the treatment. These are the devices we are looking at. If you look at the ones that suck out air from the blood system, we are looking at these types of devices. And they were used traditionally. You could use horns of animals, but we are looking at how we can have modern devices. Then we have monographs of the plants, of the medicinal plants, which define what kind of plant it is, the kind of remedies it can address, and how we prepare the medicine from it. Then number 6, we have the treatment procedures. We are looking at what are the treatment procedures and the codes of ethics that can be used to ensure that we do this process in a clear, transparent, and confidence-building manner. Now, this is a committee that has very many members. 19 countries are participating, and is a very active committee. I think Secretary General would wish to stop at that point, and if there are questions or any materials, I would be happy to answer that. And Professor Morris, you as a member, could address some of the questions if they come up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben, for using the time allocated, 7 minutes. Actually, I want to ask you one question. How do you see the challenges with regard to mainstreaming the African traditional medicine into the national health system? But also, when you look at the project that ARSO has, how does the African traditional medicine link into the pharmaceutical industrialization program of the African Union?
Thank you very much for the question. And when we look at the challenges of mainstreaming the African traditional medicine into the pharmaceutical manufacturing system or the healthcare systems, we have these challenges of lack of documentation. We have the challenges of determining what are the dosages that can be used in each element, and what are the experiences that we have that have been built up. What is the documentation and this research that has been done in this? Now, these are some of the aspects we are addressing, and we are looking at the number of people who have done the research, collating this information, and demonstrating that indeed this is what it can do, and there's proven science behind it. It's very much in parallel to what is happening in the pharmaceutical industry, where a lot of research is done, there's documentation, there's testing, and from that you can be confident about the aspect of the safety, efficacy, and quality of the product. Now, when you look at the pharmaceutical manufacturing plan for Africa, it does recognize the fact that traditional medicine has been in use for long, but we need to bring it on board. How do we do it? We have standards that can demonstrate good manufacturing practices. We have standards that can demonstrate that you've harvested the material in a safe way and is sustainable. So these are the ones that we need to put in place to ensure that indeed it can make an impact in demonstrating that it's a system that can be relied upon to play a role in the healthcare system of the continent.
Thank you very much. I see the research and development is very key for developing this sector. Thank you very much, Ruben, for your presentation and the insight on the question. Our next speaker is Basim Hamza from AfCFTA. He will be discussing with us a very good topic on repositioning Africa for self-reliance and resilience in the face of the future global pandemic. Because Africa should be starting thinking about the post-COVID. But looking at the Made in Africa brands, how can Africa become competitive in a key sector like agro-processing and the pharmaceutical industry? Hamza, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Himogene, and we appreciate ARSO's invitation to participate in this important webinar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are all safe and well. Some of the audience might not be aware about AfCFTA, so I will start by providing a brief introduction about AfCFTA. If you can go to the first slide, please. Yeah, thank you. The African Export-Import Bank, AfCFTA, is a pan-African multilateral trade finance institution created in 1993. The bank's mandate is to finance and promote intra- and extra-African trade. So the bank focus is to support any activities that would result in the growth of trade among African countries or between Africa and the rest of the world. Currently, the bank have 51 African member countries, and it has quarters in Cairo, Egypt, and we have regional offices, one in Abuja, Nigeria, for Anglophone West Africa, and another regional branch in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, for Francophone West Africa region, and one in Kampala, Uganda, for the East Africa region, and one in Harare, Zimbabwe, to serve the southern region. And of course, the northern region is being serviced from the headquarters. The bank is investment grade rated by Moody's and Fitch, which is higher than the credit rating of all African countries. This enables the bank to provide the required support for trade finance transactions for the member states and African producers to import the needed raw materials and manufacturing for manufacturing and the purchase of the equipment also to process, as well as attracting foreign investors and financiers to the continent to support projects and trade. The bank runs on 5-year strategic plans. The current strategic plan is the 5th strategic plan, which is titled Impact 2021, Africa Transformed, which is based on 4 key pillars. As you can see from the diagram, the first pillar is the intra-African trade. We want to promote and support the intra-African trade. The second pillar is to support industrialization and export development in the continent. The third pillar is to continue to be a trade finance leader in the continent, supporting all the African producers and banks and member countries by providing the needed trade finance solutions. The fourth pillar, which is an internal pillar called financial soundness and the performance, we need to ensure that the bank will also be financially sound to ensure its sustainability, to be able to support the continent. The next slide, please. In implementing this 5th strategic plan that I have just highlighted to you, the bank have conducted a desktop research to identify the key challenges facing the industrializing of the continent, as well as being resilient to external shocks. Because currently the continent, each time there is an external shock, whether it's geopolitical or like the pandemic or a trade issue, all the countries are hit and the economies are severely affected. Based on this research, the bank identified the key challenges which needs to be addressed. The first challenge is the lack of infrastructure. The infrastructure deficits, which include both the hard and soft infrastructure. The soft infrastructure is the regulatory framework. The hard is the infrastructure itself, ports, roads, airports, and the like. As well, and this lack of infrastructure limits the trade, industrialization, and the regional integration in the continent. According to the World Bank estimates, Africa has a financing need for infrastructure of $130 billion per annum. However, what is available in investment is around $45 billion only. So this means that we have an annual gap of $85 billion each year. And no single institution or country can do this on its own. So we need to collaborate together to cover this gap or find solutions to address this issue of lack of infrastructure. The second challenge is that African economies are heavily dependent on production and exports of primary commodities, and consequently is highly vulnerable to external shocks, because those commodities prices, fluctuate all the time. And we only export like oil, coffee, cotton in its raw form. So all the economies in Africa are exposed to this volatility in those prices, and thus they are vulnerable to those external shocks. The third key challenge is the lack of trade information, which limits access to the international and regional distribution channels for made in Africa manufacturers, which hinders the growth of intra and extra African trade. For example, in Egypt, we manufacture furniture, but Egypt doesn't have wood. So they import wood. From where they import wood? They import it from Europe, the US, or Asia. While in Africa, we have abundant resources of wood. That's why the bank is trying now to make this connection. There's countries like Gabon and other countries in Africa that have good quality wood that can be provided to Egypt for the manufacture of furniture, and this furniture can be sold back in Africa or exported in other countries. This is just an example. The fourth challenge is African producers are facing difficulties in complying with international standards and technical regulations, which have and continue to deprive them the ability to participate effectively in regional and global value chains. Although the tariffs have been removed or reduced, this is a key challenge facing all African producers. Their shipments facing rejection are not being accepted at the target markets, and this limits the export potential for Africa. So it's a key issue that needs to be addressed. The fifth key challenge is the inadequate finance solutions, particularly for SMEs, which represent the majority of businesses in African economies. Over 70% of businesses SMEs. SMEs face a credit gap of around $136 billion, which is a huge gap. Okay, so those are the key issues that the bank have identified that needs to be addressed to help Africa to be industrialized and also to be resilient to external shocks. So please, can you move to the next slide? Thank you. To address these key issues, AfCFTA Bank have decided to implement a number of key initiatives, such as supporting and promoting the development of industrial parks and export processing zones. This initiative aims at addressing the infrastructure deficit that we mentioned and increasing value addition, encouraging processing and manufacturing in Africa instead of selling the products in its raw form to the rest of the world. This will increase our revenues in Africa. So through this initiative, the bank is promoting export development and industrialization in the continent, as well as supporting the structural transformation of the economies to be less dependent on the export of raw commodities, and thus be resilient in the face of external shocks. AfCFTA Bank is supporting currently the establishment of industrial parks and export processing zones in a number of African countries. I'll give just an examples like Cote d'Ivoire and Nigeria and Malawi and other. This is projects that are being developed by the bank as a sponsor. Other projects, we support private sector or governments to develop industrial parks by providing the needed finance to develop this industrial parks. The major advantage of this solution or using industrial parks is that it needs a limited capital outlay to address the issue of the infrastructure. And within this business park or enclave, the government will provide enabling business environment like tax holidays and custom holidays. So it attracts businesses and tenants to be based on this industrial parks, and thus increase the productivity and the processing and industrialization in the continent. The second initiative that the bank have initiated to address those challenges is supporting the establishment and expansion of export trading companies, or we call it ETCs, to ensure that the goods that will be produced in the industrial parks are traded and facilitate access to both regional and international markets. The development of ETCs will in turn enable African manufacturers to bridge the information gap. As we said, there's an information gap. Having those ETCs will address this issue and access both regional and international markets, overcome the lack of export knowledge and cumbersome border procedures, addressing the difficulty in accessing affordable trade finance solutions and finance, improve the internal factors by allowing African producers to focus on the production and improving the quality of the products, and leaving the sales and marketing of the goods to the specialists, which are the export trading companies. The third initiative that is initiated by the bank also to address those issues is supporting the establishment of internationally accredited African Quality Assurance Centers, or what we call AQACs. This AQACs will provide conformity assessment services such as testing, inspection, and certification services, as well as training services and capacity building on conformity assessment aspects. This will enable African producers to comply with international standards and technical regulations at targeted markets, and thus ensuring the safety and the quality of products for both domestic and international consumers, as well as enhancing the competitiveness and attractiveness of made in Africa goods, as well as facilitating regional integration and intra-African trade under the AfCFTA framework. And also it will help to improve market access and contributing towards export growth. Can you please move to the next slide, please? Under this AQAC initiative, the bank have done several actions to implement it. For example, we are developing a pilot AQAC project in Ogun State, Nigeria, that will focus on food and agri-products. And in this project, we are partnering with Proveritas to manage and operate the facility. The estimated project cost for this project is around $10 million. Also, we are currently looking at 3 other opportunities to develop other AQACs, 2 opportunities in East Africa and 1 in North Africa. And also we are exploring for other opportunities to support whether the public sector or the private sector to either develop new centers or expand their existing capacities, or help them to get the needed accreditation. Under the AQACs initiative, we are collaborating with ARSO and B2B Germany to develop an African quality policy to improve the quality infrastructure in the continent, which is needed to improve the soft and the quality infrastructure. We're also collaborating with ARSO on the harmonization of standards in the automotive sector to facilitate the development of African automotive industry. In addition, we are partnering with ARSO and the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, ITFC, regarding the harmonization of standards for pharmaceuticals and medicinal products, as explained by Mr. Rubin at the beginning of this webinar. The harmonization of trade standards, also we're working with the harmonization of trade standards to facilitate the removal of non-tariff barriers and the implementation of TPT and SPS annexes under the AfCFTA, and facilitate the integration in the content. Because, for example, if there is an external shock that is facing the whole world, the continent itself, we can still trade among ourselves beyond, although despite this issue that is facing the external world. So it's important to improve this regional integration. With regard to the bank, in addition to all of these initiatives, the bank have launched a couple of initiatives to face the effect of the pandemic. for example, in collaboration with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, and in cooperation with the African Union Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, we have announced an initiative that aims at identifying and supporting the capacity of African suppliers and manufacturers and importers that can produce and supply foodstuff and priority healthcare needs, including pharmaceuticals, medical supplies such as face masks, personal protective equipment, test kits, ventilators, and other healthcare related supplies. The amount allocated for this is $200 million. Also, in addition to this, the bank have a program, initiative called Pandemic Trade Impact Mitigation Facility, or BATEMFA, which is totaling $300 billion, which is available for the member states and financial institutions and African producers to enable them face the challenges resulting from the pandemic. I think this concludes my presentation. Thank you all. I don't know if you have any questions on my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Basim, for the good presentation. I would like to ask you just one question. You have really done a lot and a good analysis of what is required for industrialization in Africa. Currently, the AQAC haven't been completed. What do you do meanwhile, before these quality assurance centers are not there? What do you do with the export trading companies that you are working with in order to conform to the standards?
Okay. For the export trading companies, while firing export trading companies and provided them with the finance needed to purchase the products from the African producers and sell it to the external market. Okay, this is how we support ETCs. In order to ensure that the products meet the quality that is needed at those products, there are some centers that already exist, whether owned by the governments. Like Kenya, they have their own laboratories. In Ghana, also Nigeria have also a couple of laboratories. Maybe they are not sufficient to cover all the need, and that's why we are intervening to increase the number of centers available, because sometimes they have to go outside of the continent to do this testing, which costs them more money. Yeah. So also we are discussing with, actually, this AQAC is supposed to be constructing, we will start by end of this year, so it can be operational by end of next year. The construction will take 1 year of this AQAC in Nigeria. And in parallel, we are working with those 3 opportunities. We are not waiting to see what the outcome of this AQAC in Nigeria. We're trying to see other opportunities in the market. And also we're discussing, for example, in Egypt with the government to see if they need support to expand their capacities that are existing now to cover the needs of the market. So we can support existing, whether private or public sector, to improve their capacity by expansion, or even if they want to do a new facility, we are fine with that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Basim. I am happy that even if they are not completed, you are still helping in conforming to the requirements for accessing the markets, being Africa or international, when our industries are exporting their product. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
I would ask the participant, if you have questions, please use the chat for the questions. We'll look at the question at the end of the presentation. Our next speaker is George Murumba, who is the project manager of the Homegrown Solutions Initiative under AUDA-NEPAD, the African Union Development Agency. He will be talking to us on reducing the Africa's reliance on imports and thinking Africa industrialization, looking at the positive lesson arising from the COVID-19 pandemic and with potential homegrown solution and the various other challenges and best practices. George Murumba, you have the virtual floor. Thank you.
Secretary General, thank you very much, Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is definitely a great opportunity for me to be here today on behalf of our institution and the leadership of Dr. Mayaki to present this important initiative that we are developing under the African Union Development Agency. So rightly, as you said, Secretary General, the context of COVID-19 threw upon us very complex and extraordinary challenges and uncertainties. However, within that context, the African Union was called upon, as with other African institutions, to put in place strategies and mechanisms to be able to assist the African continent and its member states to respond appropriately to these challenges. So basically, the African Union Development Agency launched its COVID-19 response plan as part of the broader African Union response to COVID-19 under the leadership of Dr. Mayaki. So what we found is that with the support of JICA, we looked at the context, and we definitely saw that COVID exposed Africa's reliance on imports and relatively low pandemic responses. We did, through our analysis, see that COVID-19 has definitely shown the health system weaknesses more broadly. It has shown the economic impact given the supply chain interruptions. We rely a lot on imports, and many African countries, if you recall, in the earlier days of the pandemic, were very constrained with supplies, personnel, and systems on how to respond. As time went along, we also noticed, as Africans, we've been able to come through very complex issues. And we detected that the member states and businesses, small, medium, and micro enterprises are responding to this by coming with innovative solutions, responding to this pandemic. So we thought this is an opportunity to be able to look at these novel innovations that are coming up, businesses, to be able to see whether we can make and scale these solutions for the benefit of the African continent. So we came about with the homegrown solutions. Particularly, we thought to strengthen African pandemic resilience and broadly making the health systems more stronger, because that therein lays the challenge. Equally so, the opportunity that was brought forward by the now signed and almost being rolled out ACFTA was a very good and catalytic moment for us to look at this initiative. Next slide, please. So again, just to premise the whole discussion, as I've alluded to before, pandemics will be with us. We know that, this history has told us, epidemiologists have told us, so this will occur. How do we get more prepared? They have severe consequences. Most importantly, they disproportionately for the African continent, given our economic context, affect the very poor and marginalized members of our community and member states. And in many instances I've alluded to, we were significantly underprepared. So with what we found in some of the innovative products that are homegrown, how would we want to use this as an opportunity to be able to nurture these solutions so that we can build resilience going forward? So in a nutshell, we are looking to accelerate innovative, homegrown solutions to strengthen Africa's pandemic resilience. And as you know, Chair, we are guided by the spirit of Agenda 2063 aspirations and the various frameworks that provides for us. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before I go into that particular slide, allow me to walk. We had a limitation, Chair, with the number of decks of slides that we were given. So I'm going to talk to a slide that's not there, but just to give context to the path that we are walking with this project, so that you can locate where we are and where we are going and how we are going to get there. So earlier this year, around August, we started with kind of the baselining and design of this project. So what we did is, together with JICA, BCG, ourselves, Africa CDC, WHO, and other partners, we came together and we started looking at how, from the bottom up, we can develop some of these solutions. Next, with the help of our support, we benchmark other accelerators to see how have they worked, how can we learn from what they've done, and how can we use that experience to be able to really make this a success. We also looked internally at ourselves and looked at what are some of the projects, some of the initiatives that we're doing that we can be able to learn from and ensure that we leverage on those. And as you know, Chair, we continue to engage with our stakeholders, including yourself, and that is where the issue of standards with this will come. And most importantly, we engage with our member states. So basically, we are still within the baselining and design phase of this initiative. We are hoping to be able to move to mobilize and refine and prepare the concept fully. And then after we do that, we move to the learn by doing phase, where we hope to pilot this in the East African region by selecting a cohort of homegrown solution innovators and track their learnings, and then finally scale up this whole process. So that is the kind of long road that we are going. But let me come back to the slide that is before you. What have we learned so far? We have learned, as I've mentioned again, we are very relatively low in our resilience in responding to pandemics, and we are exposed significantly to global supply chains, not only from the health sector, from even other sectors, industrialization, manufacturing, and so on. We've seen how that has impacted upon us. So we found that with the corresponding 6 elements that we've identified, we want to see how we can respond to those needs. Exposure to supply chain disruptions and competition, how do we do this? You know, low and fragmented health capacity, as we know in the different African contexts, the ratios, the facilities are way below what the standards should be. The very skewed, and I use the word here because in the continent as compared to other continents, we have a very skewed digital capacity. Some have capacity, but even in member states that do have capacities, they might be nodal, concentrated in urban centers, but with our expansive continent, we have problems and pockets that are not covered. The other issue is the issue of funding, and we know raising funding to respond, even our member states are not able to adequately provision for this. Coordination, you know, we have, if I take an example, multi-sectoral, multi-ministerial teams that need to work better, private sector, public sector to work better. And most importantly, the issue of regulatory and trade barriers. And I think, Chair, this is where the issue of standards, as you can see, needs to come in. And we're hoping that in the next slide, which I'm about to launch into, if we can just segue to the next slide, please. So next slide, please. I think there's a different slide. Yes, that's the one. There's kind of, okay, thank you very much. It's clear now. So if we cluster those elements that I've just talked to, then the issue is the what. How can homegrown solutions solve in order to strengthen the resilience across Africa? And that, what do we do to address reliance on external chain, low fragmented health capacity, and the digital capacity? And then there is, how do we do this? How does the homegrown solution need to be supported in order to catalyze and really be an enabler for these elements that have to do with funding inefficiencies and regulatory issues? And with that, we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we decided to sequence the decisions to design and test proof the concept. So as I said, we are still earlier on. We're trying to really look through this, having talked to a lot of people, other accelerator platforms, players who really have the skin in the game in the acceleration process, in the health sector, you know, in business, in finance, you name it. And then we will focus with high potential strengthening with guidance from the following dimensions. I beg your pardon. The sector, which sector will we be looking at? And as we know, we've settled on building capacity in the health sector to ensure pandemic resilience. What are the priority solutions? Again, what company stage? Because the needs, for example, of a stage of a company or an entity in the early stages vis-a-vis a company that is in a mature stage might be different. But where is it that you find that you will get the best results in applying this solution? The other issue is the geographic space, which, as I've alluded, for starters, we are going to pilot in the East African region and then be able to scale up this in the rest of the continent. As you know, we are a continental entity, so this is something that we're going to do continental-wide. How do we accelerate the impact? The issue is we select the best, and that is why I alluded to thinking through a robust pipeline. We're developing the kind of criteria, methodology, and then be able to make the final decision. We need to add value by providing specific interventions that play out unique advantages to our people. Last but not least, Secretary General, is we developed, if you could move to the last slide, please. We developed the minimum viable offering. Basically, these are the solutions that are tailored to providing. And, so we have 4 areas that we think we primarily will be able to support these through the accelerator platform to be able to ensure that these are scaled up. One is context-specific advisory, specific to the industry, specific to the player. If it's standards, for example, this is where we get ARSO, we get them involved, we ensure that the issues are resolved. Access to affordable capital, we've talked about. It's about how navigating issues of capital, de-risking, and so on and so forth. Regulatory, equally, is an issue that we know we've come across. We've seen a lot of initiatives come across very complex regulatory challenges. And last but not least, Secretary General, is the issue of matching to strategic partners. Either it is hand-holding, giving you someone who can be able to match, and so that you can pair up and make a success of this. So I'm hoping I've not gone beyond the 5 minutes that you gave us, but I've tried my best. There was quite a number of slides, but I've tried to compress it as much as possible. But Secretary General, thank you very much for the invitation, and we certainly are working with you in this journey, as you know. Thank you, and thank you to the listeners.
Thank you very much, George. Actually, I was enjoying. I couldn't check my watch if we passed the 5 minutes. It's a really good gap analysis and a good project. We look forward for this homegrown solution. I just want to tap into your knowledge as the expert, as a person and an African. Are you not worried really that post-COVID we might go back looking at those gap analyses? Our regulatory bodies stop talking to standard organization, saying you are touching to my area. Our ministries start separating again because the crisis is over, where you talked about inefficiencies in coordination, you talked about regulatory issues, and we start also saying, oh, why not buy from outside? I don't want to mention the countries, while our SMEs have been doing well and our industries have been doing well. What do you think of that?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think those are very good questions, because that is our past. But I think, first of all, as a person, there is living with COVID and living with other pandemics, but no post-COVID. So this is here with us. We have to change the way we do business. It cannot be business as usual. Secondly, we have a number of good things that are happening. The issue of the ACFTA will force us to change the way we work, because we have to develop our industrial capacity, and we have to develop it bottom up. And this is just but one nugget of how we will do this. So we have to align and ensure that we succeed. Otherwise, beyond that, we have a marching orders and a mandate from our heads of state to ensure that the ACFTA works. So I believe there is no going back. There is only going forward. If anything, the convergence is here with us to stay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I like the optimism that we have, and as you said, we don't need to talk just about COVID. There are other things that we live with every day, that actually this was a lesson learned, that we should be prepared. Thank you, George. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Worko Gemechu. We are now starting a session from our different member states. Gemechu is a researcher in Ethiopia in the Public Health Institute. Is going really to tell us what Ethiopia has been doing. Yeah, I don't want to preempt to your presentation. Just Gemechu, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Worko from Ethiopia. I'm going to present on experience and the challenges in the use of Ethiopian traditional medicine, the standardization process, and the quality policies. I'm going to start with introduction. Ethiopia is one of the oldest nations in the world, and it has a rich source of traditional medicine and indigenous knowledge practice. In Ethiopia, traditional medicine has been made from locally grown plants, animal products, and minerals. Different literatures study conducted in Ethiopia shows that 80% of the human and 90% of the livestock population in Ethiopia depends on traditional medicines, at least for primary health care delivery. Concerning the epidemic disease that is COVID-19, Ethiopia, we have one medicament that's developed from the traditional medicine to prevent the transmission of disease and boost the immunity of the patients of COVID-19. Patients of COVID-19 is under the process of getting ethical clearance. Immediately after it gets ethical clearance, it will be going to we will be going to conduct clinical trial. Please, the second slide. Had it been Ethiopia, one of the old nations in the world, and has a lot of experience in practicing traditional medicines, still there are many problems that are associated with the Ethiopian traditional medicines. I'm going to present some of these. The first one is the presence of hostility between traditional medicine practitioners and modern medicine practitioners. This creates no knowledge sharing or transfer between them, and this is a serious problem. The other is it reduces or impacts collaborative effort to validate the traditional medicine scientifically. The other challenge is weak collaboration among stakeholders. There are also very weak partnership among research communities in Ethiopia, private entrepreneurs, industries in the research and development, as well as production of traditional medicine products. The other challenge that we face in Ethiopia is there is lack of well-developed guideline by the regulatory authority. This brings difficult to establish standards of premise code of conduct for code of conduct for the practice of traditional medicines. And again, it is difficult to control quacks, fraud practices, and illegal activities. The next slide, please. Thank you. The other challenge is secrecy of traditional medicines. There is a limited protection and preservation for indigenous knowledge. This results in traditional healers to conceal their knowledge and unwilling to collaborate with the scientists, which has its own impact on validation of traditional medicine. The last but not the least is the poor attitude of modern health practitioners toward the integration in modern medicine. Here, modern medicine practitioners said that safety of the traditional medicine is not scientifically proved. This is one of the reasons they arise. The second one is the efficacy of the traditional medicine is not scientifically validated. Again, they argue that herbalists have no knowledge of scientific disease process. The next slide, please. So I'm going to present standardization. Before I go, I'm going to present the standardization, why standardization is needed. Standardization is important because non-standardized medicinal plants and their preparation can be considered as the major barrier to the integration into effective primary health care in Ethiopia. This is the main problem that we face. The other is non-standardized and poor quality of preparation may cause risks that lead to countless adverse reaction extending to days. This is again a serious problem. Also, it is difficult without standardized traditional medicine. It cannot penetrate into the world's booming health herbal market. Therefore, standardization is crucial in practicing traditional medicine. Now, if standardization, non-standardization of medicinal plants brings this serious problem, it must be standardized. So what it means by standardization and what are the activities going to be carried out in standardization is going to be presented. Please, the second slide, the next slide. Now, standardization of medicinal plant is the process of prescribing a set of standards or inherent characteristics, constant parameters, definite qualitative and quantitative values that carry an assurance of quality, efficacy, safety, and reproducibility. Now, we should have to work for specific standards. This is done by experimentation and observation these activities and the parameters that obtained from experimentation and observation can be categorized into a collection of parameters. This can be categorized. This can be mentioned as morphological or microscopic, macroscopic, physicochemical parameters, phytochemical parameters, pharmacological and purity, also residue parameters. All activities that have been under the standardization process can be categorized under this in one way or another way. The next slide, please. In Ethiopia, there is Ethiopian policy on traditional medicine. In Ethiopia, there is a traditional policy. However, regardless of the existence of the policy, still Ethiopia has a problem that encourages and promotes appropriate use and protection of traditional medicine knowledge. Although much of the effort has been undertaken in the development and the promotion of traditional medicine, there is still difficulties and challenges in utilization the traditional medicines. However, we use WHO guidelines and consulting other literatures in standardization, Ethiopian medicine at laboratory level at least. And we customize these WHO guidelines and other literatures and develop standard operating procedures that has been done in laboratory, particularly at Ethiopian Public Health Institute at the directorate level known as Traditional and Modern Research Directorate. From the very beginning of collection of the plants up to the efficacy tests and preclinical tests. Now I come to the end. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you very much, Gemichu. And thank you for utilizing well the time. As a person who are in public health, and
Yes.
I also like that Ethiopia has the policies related to Africa traditional medicine, standardization work is going on. Just specifically for during this COVID-19, what was the role of standardization linking to the public health? Thank you.
Thank you. Standardization is very important, as I mentioned. Unless otherwise drugs are standardized, instead of curing the human beings, they may even cause a serious problems up to date. Therefore, all medicinal plants, because even though it is said that traditional medicines are safe, unless otherwise it is verified, it is difficult to accept the general speaking. Therefore, it has to be standardized. When we standardize, we are going to look at the profile of the toxicity of the plant. The quality of the plant, again, has to be taken into consideration, and the efficacy of the plant. Therefore, all activities are going to be conducted after we standardize the traditional medicine. Therefore, traditional medicine is a crucial activities in before trying on human beings or before go to the clinical trial.
Thank you very much. Maybe out of your knowledge as a person during this period of time, can you say that Africa traditional medicine helped your country during this COVID-19?
Yes, we have one traditional. We have one traditional medicine that is developed from the Ethiopian traditional medicine, and we are going to conduct after we get the clinical ethical clearance. This we go to the literature review, and from traditionally claimed Ethiopian medicine, because traditional healers say that the one that we develop is normally used for different types of respiratory activities. For instance, influenza, flu, and the like. It is given in the form of herbal tea and infusion as steam, and in different forms of preparation.
Thank you.
And there is also traditional healers present. A lot of around 15 traditionally claimed for respiratories to our laboratory, and we search and finish the literature review on all plants, on these plants, and start the preclinical testing. One is under, just after we get the clearance, we'll get into the clinical trial.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gemichu, for a good presentation. Actually, demystifying also that the use of the African traditional medicine is not really happening. Thank you a lot for your presentation and the insight on the question. Our next speaker c'est Monsieur Séraphin, qui est le directeur général du Bureau de normalisation du Madagascar. Il va aussi nous donner l'expérience sur ce que le Madagascar a fait pendant la période du COVID-19. Vous savez très bien que le Madagascar était sur beaucoup de médias concernant la médecine traditionnelle, et je sais aussi par médias que beaucoup de pays ont utilisé le produit fabriqué à Madagascar. Séraphin, c'est le moment de nous dire ce que vous avez fait dans votre pays. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le Secrétaire général. Donc, bonjour à tous et je tiens d'abord à remercier donc l'ARSO de cette initiative de vouloir bien organiser cet événement. C'est très important pour nous et également pour les Africains en général. Aujourd'hui, je vais vous partager donc l'expérience de Madagascar dans le domaine de la lutte contre le Covid. Donc, si on peut passer aux diapositives suivantes. Voilà. Voilà. Avant donc l'entrée de la médecine moderne à Madagascar, qu'est-ce qui s'était passé? Donc, les soins que les Malgaches apportent à leurs malades, la notion même de la maladie découle pour une grande part des croyances religieuses et de superstitions. Donc, ça, c'était le cas. Des apports également des migrations arabes, indonésiennes, polynésiennes et surtout africaines. Donc, ça, c'est l'expérience. Donc, il y a des pratiques ancestrales qui ont été transmises aux aînés par la médecine traditionnelle. Il y a également l'existence des guérisseurs traditionnels. Donc, cette médecine traditionnelle a été caractérisée par l'existence des guérisseurs traditionnels dans toutes les régions de l'île, Madagascar, et ça devient une pratique habituelle dans les régions, surtout dans les régions les plus reculées où il n'y a pas d'établissement de soins. Et la médecine traditionnelle également à Madagascar a été caractérisée par une abondance inestimable des variétés de plantes. Voilà. Voilà donc le cas concernant la médecine traditionnelle. Quand on regarde donc le COVID-19 à Madagascar, donc ça a changé la façon de vivre des Malgaches. Tout ça, c'est dû au confinement. Et Madagascar, donc, disposait quand même des chercheurs qui sont, disons, qui sont de renommée, des savants. Donc, si on peut passer voilà, le dispositif suivant. Next. Next slide, please. Voilà. Donc, qu'est-ce qui s'était passé? Donc, nous avons un professeur qui a fondé donc l'Institut malgache de recherche appliquée. Donc, il a fait ses recherches surtout dans les plantes médicinales dans les années 70. Donc, il a créé cet institut-là. Il a fait donc des recherches pour trouver des médicaments capables de guérir des maladies. On peut citer donc en particulier donc, les médicaments à base d'artémisia qui a été utilisé donc, pour guérir le paludisme. Également un médicament qu'on appelle Madécasol, qui est actuellement donc produit au niveau de l'industrie pharmaceutique Bayer en Allemagne. Donc, à partir de l'année 70, on a commencé donc à faire des recherches et à partir de cette situation, c'est-à-dire cette pandémie, le gouvernement n'a pas tardé à agir, c'est-à-dire le gouvernement a essayé d'aider donc les chercheurs en mettant en place, en aidant donc l'Institut, en produisant donc le fameux médicament Covid Organics que vous voyez donc sur la photo. Des essais cliniques ont été effectués, engagés, et actuellement on attend encore donc les résultats de ces essais cliniques. Ce qu'on a constaté, c'est que ce médicament a pu donc renforcer le système immunitaire des Malgaches et ça a quand même aidé pour la guérison. Actuellement, qu'est-ce qui s'était passé? Actuellement, donc, on a un taux de guérison à 96%. Donc, c'est un taux assez élevé par rapport à d'autres pays. Voilà. Next. Donc, si on peut passer diapositive suivante, s'il vous plaît. Voilà. Qu'est-ce qui s'était passé également? L'organisme de normalisation de Madagascar, donc le BNM, a joué un rôle important dans la lutte contre le Covid à Madagascar, car le bureau a fait donc la promotion de la norme qui a été développée par l'AFNOR, donc la norme pour les masques. Et beaucoup d'entreprises malgaches ont fabriqué donc ces masques-là et ont exporté ces masques-là en Europe. Donc, c'est déjà une chose parce que ça a permis donc de créer beaucoup d'emplois aux Malgaches. Ça, c'est vu que beaucoup d'activités ont été arrêtées pendant le confinement. Donc, l'État a permis quand même aux entreprises de fabriquer des masques et le bureau de normes a fait la promotion de ces normes-là et a mis à la disposition des entreprises les normes. Voilà. Qu'est-ce qui a été constaté également? On a constaté un manque de laboratoires. Ça se fait ressentir donc à notre niveau. Les tests sont insuffisants. Donc, ce qui a conduit donc l'État à créer un laboratoire, donc à mettre en place un laboratoire qui a été inauguré donc par le président de la République. Et ce nouveau laboratoire donc a beaucoup aidé dans les activités d'évaluation de la conformité, c'est-à-dire donc les tests au niveau du COVID-19. Et on a quand même mobilisé également les autres laboratoires qui n'étaient pas fonctionnels. Donc, on a doté ces laboratoires-là des matériels, des compétences. On a formé les gens des laboratoires et on a pu augmenter donc le nombre de tests dans le domaine du COVID. Voilà. Et next. Voilà. Donc, quand on regarde ça, ce sont des données donc qu'on a récoltées donc sur Internet. Quand on regarde, donc, on a beaucoup de potentialités à Madagascar, notamment dans le domaine des plantes. Donc, on a beaucoup de plantes, beaucoup de variétés. Donc, ce qui a conduit donc le gouvernement à booster donc des activités au niveau de l'industrie pharmaceutique. Beaucoup d'associations de praticiens donc, qui pratiquent donc, la guérison par plantes médicinales ont été créées à Madagascar. Donc, ils se sont mobilisés et ils ont réuni leurs efforts donc, pour développer des médicaments et puis sortir des médicaments. Mais tout ça en collaboration avec le ministère de la Santé, donc qui donne quand même l'agrément et l'autorisation pour exercer. Donc tout ça, ça a été bien coordonné au niveau du ministère de la Santé, mais il y avait quand même une collaboration avec le ministère de la Santé à travers donc la médecine moderne et la médecine traditionnelle. Voilà. Next. Voilà. Diapositive suivante. Voilà. Qu'est-ce qui s'était passé également? Donc, cette potentialité a conduit également le gouvernement à mettre en place une industrie pharmaceutique. Donc, c'était une industrie qui ne fonctionnait plus donc, à Madagascar. Donc, il y avait des investissements effectués avec des partenaires. Et vous voyez là donc, le président de la République avec le représentant des Nations Unies lors de l'inauguration. Bon. Donc, cette industrie a été mise en place, mais les dirigeants de l'industrie ont quand même contacté le bureau des normes pour demander donc, des conseils dans le domaine de la normalisation, notamment dans tout ce qui est étiquetage, parce que il y avait quand même une polémique concernant l'étiquetage, surtout l'utilisation des codes barres. Donc, ils nous ont consultés et on les a conseillés pour la mise en place des normes. Donc, on a commencé donc à mettre en place l'industrie pharmaceutique, mais les matériels utilisés ont été importés. Donc, on a quand même eu l'aide des autres pays développé pour la mise en place de cette industrie pharmaceutique. Et l'État malgache donc envisage de produire beaucoup de médicaments localement, mais prévoit également d'exporter d'autres médicaments. Tout ça, c'est en collaboration donc avec les autres pays. Ça, c'est très important. Voilà. Donc, pour résumer, qu'est-ce que je peux dire? La COVID-19 donc, a permis au gouvernement de Madagascar de booster l'économie à travers l'industrie pharmaceutique, c'est une chose. Ça a également permis aux dirigeants d'être conscients de l'importance de la normalisation, de l'évaluation de la conformité, ça c'est très important à souligner. Et ça a permis également d'être conscient de l'importance des compétences, parce que mettre en place des infrastructures pharmaceutiques, c'est une chose, mais il faut que les compétences accompagnent donc ces infrastructures. Donc, nous, on a formé beaucoup d'experts, des gens qui travaillent dans les laboratoires, mais ça a également permis de mettre en place des politiques, des stratégies, surtout dans le domaine de la normalisation. Donc, beaucoup de secteurs ont approché le bureau des normes pour relancer leurs activités, notamment le tourisme, la construction. Et actuellement, donc, c'est quand même une avancée pour Madagascar. Et je suis quand même ravi de partager cette expérience, donc, disons, à nos collègues ici. Donc, ceci termine mon intervention. Donc, s'il y a d'autres questions ou observations ou commentaires de votre part, donc je suis prêt à recevoir. Merci.
Merci, Séraphin. C'est vraiment très intéressant de vous attendre et aussi d'attendre que l'auto de guérison de 96 pour ça peut aussi être lié et à la médecine traditionnelle que nous voyons maintenant que c'est la coutume, c'est ce que vous avez utilisé il y a longtemps, dans les années de 1970, vous aviez déjà l'Institut de recherche. Et ce qu'on a discuté avant, que la recherche et le développement, ça doit aller ensemble. Seulement, ma question, c'est juste te demander pendant la période, et on est encore dans la période de COVID, et quel est votre rôle, même aujourd'hui, en tant que le bureau de normalisation, dans toutes ces initiatives de développer le domaine de la médecine traditionnelle et à ce qui concerne le COVID-19. Merci.
Voilà. Donc, voilà. Si je peux dire, donc, le bureau de normes a joué un rôle très important parce que nous avons quand même conseillé le ministère de la Santé de sortir donc des dispositions parce que beaucoup d'opérateurs nous ont approchés pour demander, voilà, il y a des exigences, il y a des marchés donc actuellement, surtout au niveau des masques par exemple, et il y a des exigences de marché, c'est-à-dire de se conformer aux normes. Est-ce que le bureau des normes peut nous aider? Donc, il y a déjà la norme pour les masques qui a été sortie par l'AFNOR. Donc, on a commencé donc à partager ces normes-là pour que les opérateurs donc, disposent quand même d'un outil indispensable pour se conformer à la norme. Ça, c'est une chose. Deuxièmement, le bureau des normes donc, était là également pour conseiller les gens sur l'importance des laboratoires. Parce que les laboratoires, donc, il n'y avait que le laboratoire de l'Institut Pasteur qui était opérationnel à Madagascar. Donc, ils nous ont approchés et nous, on a quand même partagé les normes qui existent à notre niveau. Il y avait des discussions entre les gens qui dirigent ces laboratoires-là et le bureau des normes Donc, nous, en tant qu'organisme de normalisation, on les a conseillés, on les a donné donc les informations nécessaires pour leurs activités. Et le plus important, c'est que on les a conseillés concernant les principes. Parce que dans le domaine de l'évaluation de la conformité, il y a des principes qu'il faut respecter. Et ces principes-là donc, ont été utilisés par les acteurs dans le domaine. Et enfin, il y a également tout ce qui est management, l'importance du management, et surtout la gestion des risques, parce que certes, là, les gens utilisent la médecine traditionnelle, mais il faut quand même qu'on évalue les risques par rapport à l'utilisation de ces produits-là. Et nous, en tant que bureau des normes, donc, on les a conseillés, c'est-à-dire leur recommander donc, de faire des vérifications au niveau des laboratoires pour surtout le taux, la dose pour les produits. Tout ça, c'est très important donc, pour nous et on a quand même pu aider donc, les autres par rapport à ça.
Merci beaucoup, Séraphin. Merci pour ta présentation. Merci aussi pour votre point de réponse à mes questions. Our next speaker is Professor Maurice Yu, who is a professor of pharmacology and president of Bioresources Development Group in Nigeria. Prof actually is also ARSO Technical Committee expert. Prof, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have the first slide? Or do I share my screen? In Nigeria, can I have the first slide?
It's being uploaded. Yeah.
Okay. In Nigeria, we started early in the sense that we had developed a framework. As you know, we have 36 states from the Federal Capital Territory and also the national body. So what we did was that they formed some committees, and I'm heading one of the committees in the states as the task force on COVID-19. But my presentation essentially is as the chairman of the National Bureau Committee of ARSO. From a historic point of view, we first contact with COVID happened on 28th of February when we had the first case in Nigeria. But it's interesting that even before then, on February 4th, we had approached the federal government to indicate that there is a possibility that we have cures that emanated from Nigeria for COVID-19. And those cures that were from traditional medicine. And luckily for us, the plans concerned had already been standardized earlier. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, as I said, we have 4 pillars in our intervention. The first that we learned a lot from the past happenings, what happened in the past when we had emergencies in the health sector, particularly on 2 issues that the epidemic or the pandemic for us was not novel. We related it to what happened in 2003 when there was the first SARS-CoV, and then what we also learned from Ebola. But much more importantly, our whole national response hinges on citizen mobilization. The state governments and the federal government did a lot of consultations, a lot of coordination, and a lot of communication. Every day, the national body on task force had to address the nation to tell us the statistics and so on. That helped. But my presentation is essentially on the issue of translational medicine. The fact that traditional medicine, as we know it, has changed. And based on the convergence of technologies, modern technologies, traditional medicine has changed in such a significant manner that we should be able to compete the rest of the world. And I'm happy when the person who spoke about the issue of competitiveness and the issue of homegrown solutions, that this is the time. The 2 technologies I'm talking about, next slide, the one you had just had now, had to do with the biotechnology, the development in biotechnology, particularly information technology. Is now helping us to be able to communicate with traditional healers in a manner we didn't do before. And now that when this pandemic happened, we went back to our own records to see what we have gotten. Next slide. make it faster since I have a few minutes. Next slide. We had then, based on what we've done, as I said, we had experience in COVID treatment. That we had already patented 3 compounds in 2015, note the date. That was 5 years before COVID-19 came on. And so that we had something to work on. So we approached our government, and then that's the development story that I just want to share with you. One is from Precralima, Garcinia cola is what we call Beta cola here, and andrographis. We started to concentrate on those 3. Next slide. Next slide. Interestingly, the compounds were also active against Ebola virus, MERS coronavirus, and SARS coronavirus. Why this is important is to tell the truth that the traditional healer, in as much as he doesn't know about the COVID-2, knows something about this disease, because these particular drugs also help in other diseases that they have been familiar with. Next slide. We also base our theory on the fact that there's a 80% linkage between SARS-CoV-1, the one that happened earlier in 2003, and SARS-CoV-2. So we reckon that whatever worked at those ones, we'll be able to work on this one. Next slide. So we didn't rely on the classical pharmacology in terms of developing African traditional medicine. This is one of the take-home I want others to also take home. We relied more on network pharmacology and reverse pharmacology, so that we don't have to prove anything to anybody, but all we have to do, the empirical evidence from traditional healing, we then have to find ways to be able to see why, what happened, and how those things happen. And that is what we use in developing the product that I would like to share with you. Next slide. Well, the first is IHP detox tea. It is a tea like any normal tea, and we have had a lot of positive outcome from using the IHP detox tea. The packaging is like any other orthodox standard pharmaceutical agent. We didn't want it to look crude and non-sophisticated so that nobody will have problem with it. Next slide. The other one was what we call immunovite IHP. It is to prevent and boost the immune system, all natural, all Nigerian made. Next slide. This is the Garcinia IHP. Garcinia is our bitter cola. What this does, as I will tell you soon, because of how this particular virus works, this becomes a helper, a lifesaver. Next slide. The IHP, the detox, we have gone through all the regulatory processes. Now it is on clinical trials. We have gotten the approvals of the regulatory agency. We have gotten clinical okay. We have gotten the university buy into it. We have even gotten the approval of our National Research Ethics Committee, because the science is sound and it is based on a background that is on traditional medicine. So that the point I'm trying to convey here is that we can only compete the rest of the world if we make our traditional medicine as scientific as they are, and be able to develop dialogue with the medical profession. The people who are going to do the clinical trials are doctors, and they are people based in the universities. So there was no convincing, because we speak the same language, and we're able to transmit the same language to them about ourselves. Next slide. Next slide. The anecdotal therapy on COVID-19, we have tested this product on 140 cases of people who had COVID-19, and we had 100% success. But as we do in science, this is anecdotal until it is subjected to clinical trials. Next slide. Next slide, please. What it does, that it prevents these 3 products, they prevent the replication of the virus, first of all, or when there's a contact, it will prevent the virus from being able to take a hold on the cell. Next slide. Next slide, please. The beauty of the Nigerian drug is the fact that when you have this virus, 2 things happen. The first approach is that immune system attack. Then it takes over the immune system and then uses the person's immune system to fight the person. And that is what we have been able to do, is that this particular product stops that conversion from an immune response attack to a proper pulmonary attack. which is what kills people. So all the time, if you can catch the issue in the middle stage, the patient will not be able to transmit from being an immune system attack to a full-blown COVID-19 attack. Next slide. Next, please. So the IHP detox fills a therapeutic gap in the sense that it does not allow that issue that happens in disorders. And we also have been able to study the mechanism of action. As I said, we're using modern therapeutics to be able to, next slide, please. Secretary General, next slide. Please, next slide. Okay. We have also been able to decode the potential mechanism of action of the IHP detoxing. One, as I said, it prevents the replication of the virus, and then it is a known anti-inflammatory agent. And for older people, it stops the advanced glycation end products. And this is what makes it so selective in killing old people, the fact that you stop that particular glycation product. And then possibly the sixth number there, possibly it has a role in presenting bradykinin. When there are so many mysterious deaths in Nigeria, what happened that this particular virus is capable of over-exaggerating the AC2 inhibition that people die in their sleep. And this particular product was able to do that. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next. This is our laboratory at Suka, where we do most of the research and development work. Next slide. Next slide. This is our center, our institute, Bioresources Institute of Nigeria. Ruben has been in our program that we have. Every year we do have a program which is very important, where we bring the physicians, the scientists, the healers together, and we debate how do we solve medicinal plant product issues. And this is also helpful. This year we are going to have the same program on November the 10th, and anybody who is interested should please log in or send me an email in my email address, and you're all welcome. This is Nigerian story, and I think it's an African success story. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Prof.
I think I said within 5 minutes.
Yeah, you did very well with time. As a prophet, I don't expect less. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. Actually, we might think that you are using juju because in 2015, you had already patented some 3 products related to COVID. But when we see the laboratory, I am happy that our technical director have been there, and you are also participating in the technical committees at the African continental level. Just one question for curiosity. What percentage would you attribute to the use of the traditional medicine within the Nigerian society with regard to the COVID-19? Maybe what are the levels of the use? What are the levels? What Madagascar was telling us, probably there is a high contribution of the use of African traditional medicine with regard to 96% of the cases that have been treated till recently. Yeah. If I say treatment, don't call me as a pharmaceutical treatment. Yeah, that's people don't show any symptom today. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. We have sent a proposal on that, what you just sent down, because all over Africa, when people have high fever, the first treatment is not for COVID-19, it's for malaria. And what we are then trying to say that we are having such low fatality rate because our people start early. There is traditional medicine used 100%. Everybody, both the positive and negative ones, use traditional medicine first. Much more importantly, too, there is the inhalation treatment, which everybody in Nigeria does. So if you like, what you then do is to subtract the fatality rate which you have in the country, which is still less than 2%. So you can actually say that the 98% of those who got better, there's no way they prove that use traditional medicine. Everybody does. Even those who are in clinical, managed clinical care, behind the scene, their families send them those concussions to take and so on. So it is, since we cannot quite say how many percentage is attributed to purely traditional medicine, but everybody, and that raises a major issue now. We are having a second clinical trial we are setting up soon. The clinical trial is to now test the anti-malaria drugs against COVID-19. Luckily, the in vitro studies prove that they have in vitro activity, just like those other 3 products. So we want to now subject them to formal clinical trials. And by the way, that was why we are so excited about the Madagascar story. And Madagascar story for us was an African story. And then if we have used the standardization method, because as I said, these 3 products we have are all standardized. But if we had used standardization method, we could have been able to have the same issue with the Madagascar success story. And that would have been, again, an African success story. Everybody in Africa, including yourself, once you have malaria, you go to the shop, buy the anti-malaria and take. So people took early treatment, and we believe that we have done so well in the management of COVID-19 based on our people's use of anti-malaria drugs as a starter.
Thank you very much, Prof. I believe that I have seen in the newspapers and on the media that there are research going on to see why there is a low mortality rate in Africa, while people were statistically saying that many people are gonna die during this period. And we thank actually Almighty God that we remain healthy and we have a few cases. Let's hope that we also follow not just traditional medicine, we follow other actually requirements that our governments are putting there, protecting ourselves, social distancing, wearing masks, and others, because all those come together to help our communities. There is one question or 2 questions that came in the chat. A question to George. If George is still with us, there is a question actually coming from Prof. Iwu. What are you doing with regard to homegrown solution linking to the private sector? Is the initiative linked to the private sector? George, if you are still with us. Banis, you would like to answer? You are also from Nepal, Auda. Yeah, let's unmute you. See how we can unmute you. Yeah, now you can respond to that question, Banis.
Thank you very much. So greetings, everybody. I'd just like to respond. So George is within my division at AUDA NEPAD, and we are jointly implementing the project. So in his absence, just to respond to that question. So yes, the homegrown solution actually responds directly to the private sector, because the aim of the initiative as an accelerator is to work directly with small medium enterprises to within the health sector to facilitate their positive impact on the pandemic. So whether they are producing PPEs or medications or any form of response to the pandemic, the initiative is ready to try to engage with them and see what they are needing in terms of accelerating what they are doing. So it's directly selecting from the private sector and supporting private sector development.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Banis, for those clarification. Is Basim Hamza still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, Basim, I know you responded directly through the chat to the questions that SADC has been left out for the initiative for the quality assurance, the AQAC initiative. But you responded, although you responded to the chat, I am aware that probably few of our participants didn't see your response. Maybe you take immediately the issue of is the program open to partnership? In 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the AQAC Initiative is open for partnership with any public or private sector, and it's available for any of the 51 member states of AfCFTA Bank. And with regard to the question on the SADC region, this year we are supporting SADCAS, who is the accreditation body for the southern region, SADC, with some financial support, as there was some contribution from their member countries was delayed, and we supported them to overcome this period, given the COVID-19 issue, and so they are facing some financial vulnerability. So we supported them in this regard, and it covers, I think, around 13 or 14 member states in SADCAS. And also we are exploring with them the possibility of replicating their model in other regions in Africa, to have regional accreditation bodies in Africa similar to SADCAS. And this most probably will be with SADCAS, ARSO, and AFRAC. But this is still in early stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Basim, and thank you for your participation. My last comment before we close is that thank you, Endaru from Ethiopia, who mentioned that you are adopting the 3 standards, and a few of them are from ARSO on the Africa traditional medicine. As I don't see any other question from the chat, I would also like to thank, first of all, our presenters. You did us proud for this presentation, sharing the different initiatives on our continent. We will call upon you in the next webinars that are aligned with regard to the pharmaceutical Africa traditional